Hey, what's up everybody? Kyle Buckland here with the Artful Souls. Hope you're doing great. I just got back from a wonderful trip to Charleston, South Carolina. I was painting with the Plein Air Painters of the Southeast. They're a great group of painters. I was invited as a guest artist to join them in Charleston. And I painted with them last year in Leapers Fork, Tennessee. So that's the first step into becoming an official member of their group. You have to come. It's by invitation only, and you get invited out to paint with them at a couple different events, and then they take a vote. So keep your fingers crossed for me, and hopefully I can announce soon that I'm an official member of the Plein Air Painters of the Southeast. So while I was in Charleston, I had something interesting happen to me. And if you're one of my Patreon members, if you signed up on Patreon, then you already know this, but I'll go ahead and say it anyway. I went out onto Folly Beach, and I hiked about 3/4 of a mile away from my car, and I forgot my little medium cup that I put my medium in when I'm painting, so I didn't want to hike all the way back to the car. So what I ended up doing is I actually painted a couple paintings without using any medium at all, and it turned out really cool. I used a lot of thick paint, and I was able to mix a little bit of my medium into my white paint. So if you've watched the videos before, you know that I use a mixture of Galkit painting mediums, two-thirds Galkit mixed with about 1/3 Gamsol paint thinner. And this is what I'm dipping into as I go to thin out my paint, but I didn't have it, so I didn't have the cup to put it in. So I mixed a little bit into my white paint, and then I just used the paint nice and thick and straight out of the tube. So it created some paintings with a lot of great texture and a lot of thick impasto and a lot of character, and I liked it so much that I ended up painting that way for the rest of the trip. So it was a lot of fun. So I thought I'd do a demo here on YouTube using the same technique. So I do have my brush washer here, and this has just Gamsol in it, so I'll be using that just to thin the paint just a little bit when I first start out, but not too much, because we want to make sure we're not making just pure washes with just the Gamsol, because sometimes I can thin our paint out too much and not give it enough of a binder to adhere properly in the long run. So we want some oil into our paint. So the paint has oil in it, so we'll be using that oil in the paint to as a binder as we go. So we won't be making any real thin washes. We're going to be using the paint nice and thick. I've got a street scene here that's very typical of Charleston, that has some nice pinks and greens and blues in it. These colors are everywhere all over the city, and I inevitably found these colors creeping into my palette. So I wanted to do a demo with some of these Charleston colors in it. Now I've got my regular palette laid out here, Permanent Matter Lake, or Permanent Matter Deep, cadmium red light, cadmium yellow light, phthalo blue, ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, and ivory black, and I've got my titanium white. I've got a number 6 brush here. I'm going to be using several different brushes, because painting with this thick paint, you want to make sure that you're either cleaning out your brush a lot or switching brushes a lot so you don't muddy up your colors. Now I'm going to go ahead and just real thin, not too thin, I've got some paint in here, but I'm going to thin it out with just some paint thinner, some ultramarine blue and cadmium red light, and I'm just going to put in some very, very rough lines here to suggest where my subject matter is. So you can see I've got a nice radiating line stem. If you look at our reference photo, we've got all these lines pointing in towards this church steeple. So this is going to be our center of interest, is sort of this area right here where all these lines lead to. And then we're going to have the church steeple silhouetted over here up against the blue sky. So that'll be our center of interest right here, just slightly off to the right. But we do have all these lines pointing into the center too. It's not directly in the center, but sort of right here. So we're going to have this nice strong yellow church steeple, and we're going to exaggerate that color just a little bit against that blue sky, maybe even exaggerate the value difference between them to really pull your eye over to that area. So I want to be thinking about that right off the bat. I'm thinking about, what is my storyline here? What is my center of interest? What shapes am I using? So just real quickly, I want to go ahead and start laying in that area. So I want to go ahead and figure out where I want this steeple, and I'm going to go ahead and just put it in here, just nice and bold. And again, we can come back and adjust these. We just want it to be a suggestion of where these shapes are going to go in our picture. So then we've got this line here that comes up from this building. Got another line here. We don't want to get too detailed here. We've got this telephone pole that comes across here. Comes right down in here. Don't be afraid to draw these in there. Some people, they're a little reluctant to draw telephone poles or telephone lines. I think it gives character to the scene. So I mean, ultimately it's up to you, but you know, don't be afraid to put it in there if you feel like it. So we're just getting some main lines here. We're not trying to draw all the detail. We're going to be painting all the detail with paint. So we don't want to create a coloring book effect where we have every single detail lined out here and then we end up drawing every detail and filling in the lines. We want to keep this free and nice and loose so that we can play with the paint. So I'm really not going to do a whole lot of drawing at this stage, just sort of mapping out some big shapes. So like where our windows are, the tops of buildings. We'll get this little dark shrubbery down here. And I just got a little bit of this a little bit of this paint thinner in my brush. And I'm making sure to pick up some paint though, because I don't want a really thin wash. So I've got some paint on my brush here. Now, that's probably all of the drawing that I'm going to do. So what we want to do now is we want to squint our eyes and we want to see where the darks are and where the lights are. Now our shadows, I've lightened them a little bit in this photograph because Charleston is light and airy. You've got all these beautiful colors and light bouncing around. There's not a lot of heavy darks in a Charleston scene. So because of that, we're not going to be using super dark. So we're going to let some of this paint. Now I've got this big number 10 round bristle brush here, and I'm using this nice purple. So I'm using my permanent matter deep and ultramarine blue to make a nice purple, and we're going to use this as our sort of our base shadow color in some of these areas, and just quickly mass in these shadows. So they shift in some areas. They're a little bit more blue, so I can add a little bit of that ultramarine to them for these areas in the street. But again, I'm careful not to get them too dark. So this is sort of a higher key painting, so we don't want any super darks in there. You know, we might add a few accents just at the end, but we're keeping even these shadows sort of on the lighter side of things. There's this nice sky blue in this shadow right here, and that is echoed in the sidewalk too. So as we come down here, and we can vary the width of our brush strokes as we come out and make them a little bit bigger. So we've got some of this. There's a blue something over here. It doesn't even really matter what it is. See, we're just working with shapes and color. We've got this beautiful pink building, but the shadowed side of it is sort of a darker pinkish purple color. We'll lay that in nice and thick there. And then there are some other buildings on out there that have slightly different colors. There's sort of a purple, so we'll add a little bit more of our blue. So we're working in these realms of purple, some cool and some are warmer. Then we've got this real nice pink. Let's go ahead and lay this nice pink shadow, real crisp, clean color. So I'm using this permanent matter deep and white here to get this nice rosy pink color. And let's figure out where this goes. Now this right in here, and just nice and bold, we want to put this in. We can come up with these other shapes in front of it later, but just go ahead and lay it in nice and bold. And then I want to get some of that pink into this shadowed side of the building too. So while I've got that on the brush, I'll just put that in there a little bit. Sort of a salmon color down in here too. Right in here, I can see it. So got a little shift there. Now we have this green building on the side. We've got yellow ochre and ivory black. That makes a beautiful dulled down green. So I'm going to make that green right now. I might add just a little bit of cadmium yellow light to it, and then some more white. And if it gets too green, we can add a little bit of burnt sienna or a little bit of cadmium red or a little bit of both, just to dull it down just a little bit. And so now this is that shadowed color of this building right here. And again, I'm not using any medium, so normally, you know, I'd be using some thinner paint at this stage. but we're really laying in these shadows with some nice thick paint, and it's going to give us a neat look to the painting when it's all done. So if you haven't done this before, you know, play around with it, have fun, experiment with these thick blobs of paint on your brush, you know, and push them around and push them out of the brush. Sometimes you got to push on the brush to get it to come out, so that's all right. Got a couple little areas here. We've got some reflected light on this building right here, so we're going to add just a little bit of that orange down here at the end of it. And then we've got some areas that are more of that purple color too, which is actually white trim, but it's in shadow, so it's reflecting some of the sky color, so we get that nice purple. And you know, we can draw some of these areas out now with this purple where there's trim on the windows. And so watch, perspective is going to shift. These lines down here come up, but these lines here come down. And you don't have to know fancy equations to figure that out. Just look at it and hold your brush. If you have to, you can hold your brush up to your reference photo, to your subject matter, whether you're working in the studio or outside, and then just try to grab those angles. Match the angle with the angle of your brush. So what I'm saying is you can hold this up at like this and then bring it down, and there's your angle. And you can hold it up on the bottom, bring it down, there's your angle. And it doesn't matter if this is super detailed. In fact, we probably don't want it to be super detailed over here because this is not really near our center of interest. We get a little bit of this building that's reflected. So there's like this orange color right here, and then we've got this nice sky blue. So make sure you clean your brushes out between tones, especially when you're switching from a warm to a cool. You might even grab a different brush. So I've got another brush down here that already has some cool paint on it from another painting. Just painted a really tropical scene for my Patreon page. So if you're not a member, you can check it out. It's just $1 a month. The link's in the description below. I've got a new demo on there of a really tropical landscape, and I use this blue, so I just have these brushes that already have these colors on it. So we can go ahead and use some of this blue where the sky's reflected in the window there. Now before we switch to any light colors, let's go ahead and get this dark green in. So ultramarine blue, cadmium yellow light, a little bit of ultramarine blue, a little bit more, a little burnt sienna to dull it down just a touch. Then we've got this shrubbery here. Add a little bit more ultramarine blue. And we've got this shrubbery right in here, and it's dark at first, and then it's got some lighter green. So as we come out to the outside, I'm going to add a little bit of that cadmium yellow light to it and let it blend just a little bit, just to get sort of a variation in that shrub there. Now we have the underside of the eave, which is sort of a darker purple, but it's got some warm reflected light. So I'm going to throw some of this cadmium red light into it, and that comes down right here. Cleaning my brushes out again. Let's get this green shutter out here, so we don't want to paint over where that green shutter goes. So let's go ahead and put that down while we've got these nice clean colors on our brush. So like right in there is that green shutter. So just a couple brush strokes. Now let me grab back into this color that's already here, sort of a warm tone for this window. And then there are some nice cool, nice warm lights right here on this window. So we'll just hit them, just little spots in there. And while I've got that white on my brush, it's not actually white, it's just sort of a creamy color. There's some little spots up there that could use that color. I don't want to let this white of the canvas mess with us, so I want to lay that purple in right there. And there's burnt sienna and ultramarine blue is going to create a nice dark, but I don't want it too dark. But I do want to get a little bit of a dark quality to this, and draw this area right along where the sidewalk meets the road, and there's sort of some debris. We can go ahead and brush that in. That's just going to break up that area a little bit and sort of tell us what's going on there. There's also some similar things happening where the building meets the sidewalk, and then we have these nice lines in the sidewalk that give it some character. So I can go ahead and brush in a couple of those. Not too much yet. We can come back and add more detail to that area a little later. Now let's keep moving along here. Let's fill in these big areas before we start doing too much detail. It's easy to want to start, painting all these little areas in here and getting all this detail, but I want to try to fill in just like a big puzzle, or like if I were painting a poster. I want to try to get some of these areas in, and I'm going to squeeze out some more white. So that is one thing you'll find when you're painting like with thick blobs of paint, is you'll run out of paint quicker. So make sure you put out a lot of paint, and that's going to keep your your colors nice and clean. So I want to get this color of this sunlit building here. That's the pink building, but it's really just a kind of almost a pale sandy color. So I'm going to mix cadmium red light and cadmium yellow light, and then add just a touch of this grayish green, just to tone it down just a little bit, something like that. It's a real nice neutral color. It doesn't have a lot of pigment to it, and that's good because we have all these other vibrant colors. So we want something, and I'll tell you what, we want something for those vibrant colors to contrast with. Let's go ahead and put in where this sign is, because I don't really want to get all that light paint where this sign is, so I need to figure that out real quick. This actually comes out here, over here, right there. And that is a nice bluish purple. So we can go back into our bluish purples here and just lay that on, just nice and thick. Again, I don't want to overwork these areas. So when you're working with thick paint like that, you can put it in and then leave it alone. Just brush in that area there. Now, again, back to this creamy color, right? There's a slight variation in a value shift. So it's a little bit darker right up in here. And then right in here it's a little bit darker. And right here, but then there's a nice light part of it, so I'm going to add more white to it. Nice thick brush strokes right in here. Okay, so that's sunlight bouncing in onto that, or beaming in over that building, and onto the side of that building there. Now we can break up that just a little bit. I want to suggest a little bit of drawing here, not a whole lot. I just want to put in this sign, the bar here that's holding this sign. Okay, now keep it big and bold. Don't get in there and do too much detail. Just a little line right there for the eave of that. Now, before we get too much further, let's use the same brush that we had that light color on, but let's go ahead and make up a nice sandy, warm tone for this church and the building that the church is connected to. Now, the church is a little bit lighter, so I want to start with this sort of a warm tone, and then I'll come back with a slightly lighter yellow, a little bit more yellow tone. But I want to go ahead and get these buildings in. We can brush them in real big and bold at first and come back and break them up. Again, fight the urge to put in too much detail at this stage. Think of the way posters look, just big, flat, broad designs. That's what we want at this stage. Now, our church has a nice yellow tone to it, and I said we might exaggerate that just a little bit. Think about some of Van Gogh's paintings. He was great at picking up on some of this beautiful color and exaggerating it for the sake of the picture. So we're going to use this nice yellow color for the church. Creating a rainbow effect here using all these different beautiful colors in this painting. That's what Charleston feels like that to me. It feels like all these light and beautiful colors. Let's get a little bit of purple in there. Keep it warm though. Using that permanent matter deep to create some shadows here on the steeple. Just a little, just right there. Maybe there's just a hint of one there I see, and a little detail here. Your mind will fill in the blanks. We don't have to get in there and paint all the detail there. Now, there are some trees out there. Let's go ahead and put in those trees and make a nice greenish tone. Add a little cadmium red light to get that warmth to it. And let's real quickly just mass in some of these trees. Just a couple brush strokes is all you need. We don't need to get in there and draw all the leaves. We just are looking for the tone. So we're just filling in areas here. And you know, there's something else out here. There's other things, little bits of purple and blue out here, little bits of buildings. We'll put them in. little puzzle pieces, you see. And there's that shadow stretches across the road out here, comes across in here. There's a little bit of blue there. This shadow comes over in here. There's a little bit of a, well, I've got this darker blue on my brush. There are some tones right in here that break up this shadow. We can go ahead and put them in while I've got it on the brush. So I'm not wasting any time when I have paint on my brush and I need to put in a color. There's a dark blue for that flower box. There's a little dark blue shadows. So just little bits of color here. Here's a little bit of an awning. Comes out of that building right there. At the end of this, there's a little bit of blue. And there's a nice pink. Well, I've got this darker tone in my brush. I can mix up this nice dark pink on the other side of this shutter right there. So see? Burnt sienna, ultramarine blue, nice thick paint. We're going to paint in this telephone pole again, which we might have to, that might be too dark. Let me throw some lighter blue into there so we can mix these colors up and let them mingle on the canvas. That's part of the fun of using all this thick paint. Okay, now we've got this dark blue on the brush. There are some windows right in here. I'm not getting in there and painting every window pane though, just little touches. Do the same thing down in here. There's some burnt sienna windows right there, and then those colors could be used, the burnt sienna can be used for these windows. I'm not counting windows. I'm not getting in there and painting every single thing that's out there. Again, this is just for the picture. I don't care about the subject matter. I care about the picture. I care about my painting. I care about what it looks like, but you're not going to be looking at the subject matter in the gallery when the painting's right there. You just want a feeling of it. People know how this stuff feels. They don't care about how many, if you painted one or too many windows or not enough windows, unless they're an architect. There's that other telephone pole out there. Let me go ahead and hit some of this more thick paint while I still have these clean colors on my palette. I'm going to go ahead and hit a little bit more on this steeple. And there's this sunlit part of the road, which, it's asphalt, right? So your mind thinks, oh, it's gray or whatever, but it's not. Look at it. It's like this strange yellow. It's a grayed down yellow, so I added a little bit of blue to it. What's important here is we get the value difference. It's a nice light value. It's slightly lighter than the purple, of the shadow. That's what we're after. Color, it doesn't have to be perfect. Okay. Now, before I get into too much more detail, I want to go ahead and get that sky laid in because that's going to make a big difference to how all of our tones are reading. So I've got this nice yellow. I'm going to start with this color here, and I'm going to add a little bit of phthalo blue as I go. But I'm going to start with this sort of a yellowish greenish blue down in here. Grab some more white. Some more phthalo blue, and I'm going to carve back into this steeple. Now I want it to be a little darker than that steeple, so I'm going to add some more blue to it. So I want that steeple to really show up against the blue of the sky here. So somewhere like that, that's what I'm looking for. Now we can darken this blue as we come up in the sky. It's going to get even darker. There's some light areas that are right along the top of these buildings, so I'm going to leave some white canvas. We can come back and lay that in a second. And again, I'm exaggerating my values here. I'm making this blue a little darker than it actually is in the sky to get this sunlit areas to really pop. So I'm using more ultramarine blue near the top of the sky, and I'm letting it mix with that phthalo blue down near the bottom of the sky. And you can see how that makes that sunlit area of that church pop. Now I can come back and accentuate some of those yellows in that church off in the distance there. I want to kind of get in there and just redraw some little areas. There's some little mini steeples that come up right along the side there. To do this, I'm using the edge of the paint. I'm pushing the paint off the brush and getting a nice thick blob right on the end of the brush, and I'm using the end of the brush to draw these little tiny details on this church. Now we've got all of our colors mapped out, right? So now we can start going back and decorating our individual areas. So let's take, I want to darken up this telephone pole, because when I put that dark blue in there, I can see that I do need a little bit of a darker tone in there to contrast nicely with that dark blue. Okay. Now, before I get too far along here, I want to get my white out and paint some of these areas that are nice and white. They're going to be little areas that pop. Now they still have some warmth to them, so I'm going to add a little bit of that cadmium yellow light. Got a little phthalo blue in there. I don't want that, so I'm going to clean my brush. Add just a tiny touch of this cadmium yellow light, not too much, and get some nice thick blobs of white here. And there are some areas right along the edge of these buildings here that have white on them. There's some little pieces here. There are some little areas again on this building that have this nice white. So right in here. I'm using thick blobs of paint here. You can really see. There's this little, I want to get these little bits of drawing. I dipped my brush down into my thinner just a tad so that this dark will slide over here, over some of these other colors. So we can do that. Just don't put too much thinner in there, because you want mostly paint. Now, you pay attention to our drawing here. There's that window. Over here is another window, and it's dark underneath of it. So where that blue is, underneath is dark. And then there's a hint of light. Reflection. So we want to watch these reflections. There's a hint of light pink. So make up this nice light pink right along here. And I don't need it up at the top there. I just got a little wild with my brush stroke. It happens sometimes. I want to get this light blue down in here in the sky. There's some places where it comes through these trees out here in the distance. So just real easily and quickly, I just, one brush stroke. I don't need to get carried away. That'll do it right there. If we have the right value, we can get it done with just one brush stroke. Let's do some of these trees right over here. And there's a nice bright red flower in this flower box. Let's hit a little color there. I'm going to be careful. I don't know if I want to do these cacti right in here. I think I'm just going to do just a little suggestion of some flowers, and then just a hint of that flower box right here. Just a little bit of drawing. Might draw too much attention if we paint those cacti in there like that, so maybe just a hint of them. I don't want to get them out of control. Now let's take some little darks here and start doing some little bit of decorating. We've got this little brush. It's like a number 2 flat brush, and we can again get in here and pick out some dark areas in the sidewalk and draw them in. Accentuate a few things. Now there's all these nice beautiful telephone lines. I like electric lines and telephone lines, and adds a lot of character. How we want to do this is we want to hold the brush very delicately and get these little tiny, in fact I've got a number 1 round brush. Might be best to do it with this. And just get this sort of generic dark that we're using here for our darks. Let me go ahead and brush in that awning there. we don't want to fuss around when we do these. We want to figure out exactly where they go and then put them in there. So I've got this nice dark blue color because they're kind of silhouetted up against the blue of the sky. And let's put a few in and see how they look. They need to be a little darker. I can grab some ivory black and add it to it. This goes across here. I want to make sure we have all of our details done though out in the distance before we put any across there. So I'm going to wait on that. I'm just going to put a couple in right here. There's that telephone pole out there. Let's go ahead and get it back here. Right there. It's got the little transformer box on it. Couple of these little, just a couple little details there. I want this shadow on this church to be darker than the sky, so I'm going to come back and restate it. Yep. There's a little bit of detail out here where there's a tree trunk. And then there's all sorts of little bits and things here. It doesn't really matter what they are, we just want to get them in there. They're just kind of helping our pattern. Draw your attention out there. There's just little bits of light and dark. That's all I'm worried about right now. Little bits of light, some little bits of dark. Just to break up that distance a little bit. I mean, we don't have to get in there and figure out exactly what all that stuff is out there. There are some shadows on the eaves of this, so right in here I'm going to put this like that. This turns, actually comes in a little bit, and then there's another one up there, and then there's some more light at the top. It's a little thinner. So again, we're having fun here. This is a different way of painting. You're painting with a lot of thick paint when you're not using medium, and you're getting a lot of expressive brush strokes. You know, it's fun. It allows for a different look to your work, and just experiment with different ways of painting. I would hate for you to get stuck painting one way all the time. You want to have some general principles like design, knowledge, and different things like that. But play around with different ways to approach painting. It's so fun. There's different ways of putting the paint on. We don't want to just do something the same way every time. There's a little step out here that's nice. It comes down. Boop. Just put it out there like that. Now, we've got wording on this sign, but I don't want to make this about the words. I just want to add just a suggestion of some words. So, again, you can get in here and your brain will fill in the blanks. We don't have to really get in there and draw all the words and see exactly what it says, unless this is a commission piece and they want it to show the name of their store. Then we shouldn't be worried about it. We just want to suggest some writing on there. There's also some nice green leaves coming in. There's a tree, a palm tree. Let's get that palm tree in there. Give it that tropical feel. So to do this, we're going to make this. Palm trees have this nice way that the trunk comes out like that. We've got these nice warm tones here, and then I'm going to be a little bit kind of interpretive here with the palm tree, sort of add my own touch to it. You can do different ways. You can practice adding these palm trees in there different ways. You don't have to get in there and draw it exactly like it looks. You just want it to feel tropical. And then there's some nice vibrant green underneath, so I'm going to use some nice thick paint, grab some of this, and just brush in some of that thick paint over there. Yeah, now we're starting to have some fun. Get in here and do this. Again, I want to get all these details done out here where these little electric lines come across, because then we'll come back and add them in. But if we add them in too soon, then we'll be trying to paint our details around them, and it'll get messy looking. So sometimes you want to think, you know, front to back, painting things in the back and then pulling the thing forward. Let's do something cool here. Let's add some variation in value to the sky just a little bit. So I'm going to come back with some slightly lighter tones that have a little bit of this matter, permanent matter deep in them. So again, this kind of a purple effect, and slightly lighter, and just break that up and just add a little bit of that pink color that's in the rest of the painting to the sky. So we're tying everything together. Then what we can do is the same thing in the shadows in the down in here, where we took the pink color and put it up in the sky. We can take that greenish blue color that's in the sky and we can put it down in here into the road and different areas. Slightly lighter value than what's there, and a warmer touch. So we're tying things together. Now there's a nice little bit of sunlight that pops across out here. I don't want to forget that. It's a nice warm tone. We're going to use nice thick paint here. Get it on the edge of the paintbrush, and then just real light touch. Just lay it across there. Yep, just like that. Okay, so we're starting to get some of these details out there. There's a nice little shadow from this tree out here on this building. It's a nice warm color. I'm going to put it in there. And then I might restate that tree just with a little bit of a stronger green so that we get that feeling of that tree there. And then there are some telephone poles and stuff out there in the distance. I want to use my little round brush again to suggest some of these. They don't have to be perfectly straight. You know, some of these things lean and it can give them a fun character. So that's okay to let it lean just a little bit. Little bits. See my brush dancing around there just to create a little bit of interest. I want to figure out where the bottom of this building is and sort of suggest a little bit of a sidewalk in there. There's a little hint of where the building goes around a turn. There's a slightly darker tone. We'll put that in. Give it a little bit of form to that building. Play up some of this pink in this shadow right in here. There's a nice yellow-green color right in here. And let's go ahead and do a couple of these power lines now. I'm going to dip into just a little bit of paint thinner to let the paint flow off my brush a little bit. And just with a real light touch. Just decide where you want them and put them in there and then leave them alone. Now some of them get too thick. It's okay. That's a little thick. We can come back and thin it up. We're going to take the sky color right next to it and thin it up just a little bit. And it gets thinner as it goes out into the distance. Remember that too. These lines, these power lines, will follow the rules of perspective. Some of these are just pure dark blue. Because what's happening is the color of the sky is actually eating away at the black of the pole of the line, so you get that nice dark blue color. I want to be careful about how many of these I want to do. I think I'll get one more here. I practiced the stroke a couple times, you can see, before I do it. I put it in. That helps sometimes, so you kind of imagine where you want it to go. So little dark blues over by this. And, we don't have anybody out there necessarily, but let's put a little figure out in the distance over here by the church. I don't want it right here because it'll draw your eye right to the center of the canvas. I want it over here. And these don't have to be, we don't have to get a ton of detail in here, just a little suggestion of some people out here. Doesn't take much for your eye to see little shapes out there and think, oh, that must be a person. Just like a little dot for the head. And then like a little color for the dress or something. It's like the icing on the cake, these little touches, They're just little fun things to put in there. So draw your eye over to that area. Add a little variation to this green in the distance. See, working this way is nice because you can decide how far you want to take things. You start big and broad, and a lot of times you can get away without having to do as much detail as you'd think. I like playing with looseness sometimes in my work, you know, keeping things fresh and big and bold. And so many people have the tendency to just want to overwork and get every little detail in there, and it just kills the piece as far as, you know, my opinion. I've always enjoyed work that was just big and bold and had a lot of fun color in it. A little blue for this reflected, the bottom of the window there catches that reflected light. So anytime you have a plane that's facing up, it's going to catch that warmer tone, the cooler tone of the sky. And then when you have tones like this one that are reflecting down, a lot of times you catch the warmer tone from sunlight hitting down here. Let's add just a little bit of some detailed work right in here. So a little bit of these dark green, like little bits of these leaves here. These come off of this plant. There's some little flower baskets right here. So just a nice little shape, a little dark shape right there. And then just a hint of green at the top. Suggest some greenery in there. I'm going to restate this palm tree, the bottom of it, the trunk there, coming out. I want a transition color between the light on the road and the shadow on the road. So I'm going to take a nice orange to do this. And we want the value to be somewhere between the dark shadow color value and the light sunlit. So somewhere right in here. Just a little bit of that orange color. Now I want to add just a little bit more of a bright yellow to this yellow right in here where this line comes across the road. Looks like a greenish yellow works there. And I've got this white of the canvas still peeking out, messing with us. I want to cover that up. So like right here, I'm going to brush, going to grab some of this paint here. So I want this color, but I don't need to mix it. I can just grab it from another place on the painting. Brush it in there. Let me get this little bit of this warm light that's reflected on the face of this part of the window here. There's a nice little bit of detail right here. There's a little lantern. So you don't want to neglect these little descriptive bits of drawing near the end, because your eye sees them and goes, oh yeah, that's like a little light or something. Doesn't matter exactly if it's perfect. It just, you know, just puts it in there and it adds some fun to the scene. There are these little light things right in here, part of the architecture. Let's add a couple little birds to the sky. You know I'm a sucker for a few little birds, and there are lots of birds flying around in Charleston. Make sure you put them in a place though where it makes sense with your composition. You want it to create a bridge for your eye here. Coming around into this palm tree. So it's not that I'm just placing these just anywhere. I'm placing them in an area that works well with the composition. So I'm getting a little bit of character there. I want to hit some nice strong blues down here in the sidewalk. Little bits of this. I want it to be a little lighter than that. And come right back over top of that. Yeah, just little bits like that. Little bits of brush in the street down here. I'm going to leave that fire hydrant out because it's going to look strange if I just paint the top of it in there. It'll draw your eye over to the bottom of the canvas, and I don't want that. Just like a little bit of a... So get really close now. I'm trying to keep this nice and fresh and loose. I don't want to overwork it. So I love the bold colors in these types of scenes. And the more you work something, the less colorful it's going to get. So I want to try not to overwork this. Add a little bit of orange to that palm tree. Pull your eye around because we have all this nice warm tones in other parts of the painting. I want to pull your eye up there with a nice orange. A lot of times you'll get that too in those palm trees. The leaves down by the bottom will be more orange. And we've got a few more telephone lines, but I don't think I'm going to put them in. I don't want to really mess that up with too many lines, so a couple will look good. There is a line right here I'll put in. A couple will look good, but too many start to look crazy. Unless it's a painting about telephone lines. Like if you're just painting, you know, a painting of telephone lines, then all means put them all in. But don't get carried away painting too many telephone lines in a painting. You know, don't be afraid to put them in there, but use caution when you're putting them in. Get this dark in here. I want to get this, just sort of break up all that right in there. And sometimes it's fun too when you have all these birds flying around. You have birds. It's fun to pop a couple birds in that are sitting on the telephone line. So these are just little brush strokes, and you know they look like birds on the line because your mind has seen that. You've seen birds on telephone lines. So when you do that, it just takes a little brush stroke, and then your mind goes, "Oh yeah, there's a bird on the line there." So I'm coming close down to the wire on this. I appreciate you watching. I'll be posting more videos real soon. It's great to be back. I had so much fun painting in Charleston with the plein air painters of the Southeast. Looking forward to bringing you more content here on YouTube. This painting will be available on my website, KyleBuckland.com. The link for that is in the description below. And also, if you like what you're seeing here and you want more content, then check out my Patreon page. So it's the link is in the description below. And just for $1 a month, you can get access to all kinds of videos and more demos and some product reviews and book recommendations and reviews, and I'm going to be doing some behind the scenes stuff. So there's about 50% more content available just by signing up for $1 a month on my Patreon page. Thanks so much for watching. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. If you know other people that might benefit from these videos, it's always a pleasure to get out there and get these demos out there and get people inspired about painting. So I want you to remember to have fun, enjoy yourself when you're out. That's one of the biggest things. Let me shut up for just a second and tell you about these lines that I'm going to be putting on here. These lines are little bits of this siding, and they follow the rule of perspective. So as we come down, they're getting more and more horizontal, to where at my eye level they're almost completely horizontal, but as we come down below my eye level, they start slanting back up gradually. So see how that works? It creates a little bit of perspective right there. Anyway, where was I before I so rudely interrupted myself? Yeah, get out there, have fun, push paint around. Try this out without painting, without using medium. See what it's like to push out, you know, really thick paint and blob it all around on the canvas, and have fun with some really pure colors, and see what you think. And let me know in the comments below if you try this out and you like it. I will use a little bit of medium for signing my painting because it just makes it easier. So I'm dipping into a little bit of medium now to make this nice reddish purple. I'm just going to put this in on the left because I've got a lot of weight over on the right side with the church. I'll just sign it right down in here. This color is going to look good. This dark purple. I try to sign it with colors that are in the painting. Alright. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell for notifications. Keep up with future videos. I appreciate everybody tuning in, and I look forward to bringing you more demos here on the Artful Souls channel. Have fun, get out there, push some paint around. I'll see you soon at the next video.